Hey Reddit, I've been lurking here for a while, reading other people's stories, but I never thought I'd have one of my own to share. My name is Ryan, 34M, and I've been married to my wife, Jessica, 33F, for 7 years. We have 2 kids, Emily, 6F, and Jack, for M, and I thought we had a good life together. Turns out, I was wrong. This all started a couple of weeks ago when Jessica started acting different. At first, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there were little things that didn't add up. She started spending a lot more time on her phone, laughing at messages she wouldn't share with me. She was suddenly working late more often, and there were times when she'd come home smelling like a perfume I didn't recognize, definitely not the one she usually wears. When I asked her about it, she always had an excuse. Oh, I grabbed drinks with some coworkers after work, or it's been a stressful week, so I stopped by the mall to unwind. None of it sounded totally unreasonable on the surface, but something about her tone and body language just didn't sit right with me. I started to wonder if there was something she wasn't telling me. One night, Jessica was in the shower, and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but this time, my gut told me to check. I know snooping is wrong, and I hate that I did it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The message was from a guy named Kyle. It wasn't explicit, but it was definitely flirty. Last night was amazing, it read. I can't stop thinking about you. My heart dropped. I'd never heard Jessica mention anyone named Kyle before, and the tone of the message left no room for doubt. This wasn't just a friendly coworker or a harmless conversation. This was something more. When Jessica came out of the shower, I tried to play it cool, but I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. Hey, Jess, I said casually, who's Kyle? Her face froze for a split second before she quickly recovered. Oh, he's just a guy from work, she said, brushing it off. We've been working on a project together. Really? I said, crossing my arms. Because he just texted you about how amazing last night was. Her eyes widened, and I could see the panic start to creep in. It's not what you think, she said quickly. We went out with a group from the office, and he's just being dramatic. You know how people exaggerate. I wanted to believe her, but my gut told me she was lying. I decided not to press her any further that night, but I made up my mind to start paying closer attention. If she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I was going to find it myself. Over the next few days, I started noticing more red flags. Jessica was being overly protective of her phone, always keeping it on her or flipping it face down when she set it on the table. She also started taking work calls in another room, something she'd never done before. I knew I had to dig deeper, so I started keeping a log of her behavior, what time she left for work, when she came home, and any strange inconsistencies in her stories. Then, one Friday night, she told me she had to work late on a last-minute project and wouldn't be home until after 10. Something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me, so I decided to follow her. I know that sounds extreme, but at this point, I felt like I had no other choice. She left the house around 6:30, dressed a little too nicely for a work meeting, and drove off. I waited a few minutes before grabbing my keys and heading out after her. I kept my distance, making sure she wouldn't spot me, and watched as she drove across town, not to her office, but to a motel on the outskirts of the city. My stomach churned as I parked a few spots away and watched Jessica get out of the car. She wasn't alone. A man, tall, dark-haired, and definitely not someone I recognized, was waiting for her by the entrance. They hugged, and then he put his hand on the small of her back as they walked inside together. I sat there in shock, my mind racing. I wanted to storm in and confront them right then and there, but I held back. I needed more proof, something undeniable that she couldn't talk her way out of. So I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. I didn't sleep at all that night. Jessica came home around midnight, acting like nothing was wrong, and I pretended to be asleep. The next morning, I told her I had to run some errands, but instead, I drove back to the motel. I spoke to the front desk clerk, explaining that I believed my wife had been meeting someone there. After a bit of convincing and slipping the guy a $50, he confirmed that Jessica had checked in with Kyle the night before. That was all the confirmation I needed. Armed with the photos, the receipts, and the clerk's statement, I started planning how I was going to confront her. I wasn't just going to let this slide. I needed her to face the truth. After confirming that Jessica had been meeting her lover, Kyle, at the motel, I knew I couldn't let this continue. The betrayal was eating me alive, and I needed answers. Answers she couldn't dance around or brush off. I decided the only way to get the truth was to confront her in a way she couldn't deny. So I put a plan in motion. I waited a couple of days, carefully watching Jessica's behavior to see if she'd plan another work meeting. Sure enough, on Wednesday evening, she told me she had to stay late for a client presentation. I kept my cool and pretended to believe her, but inside, I was boiling. This was it, my chance to catch her in the act. As soon as she left, I grabbed the folder I'd prepared. Inside were the photos I'd taken of her and Kyle outside the motel, screenshots of their texts. Yes, I managed to sync her messages to our shared iCloud account, and a copy of the motel receipt I'd gotten from the front desk clerk. I was armed with everything I needed to shut down her lies. I waited about 30 minutes, then got in my car and drove to the motel. My heart was pounding the entire way. Part of me hoped I was wrong, that this was all some huge misunderstanding, but deep down, I knew the truth. I parked a few spots away from her car and waited, watching the entrance. After about 20 minutes, I saw her walk out of the room with Kyle. They were laughing, and he had his arm draped around her shoulder like they didn't have a care in the world. I felt a surge of anger, but forced myself to stay calm. I waited until they went back inside, then made my move. I walked straight into the motel and up to the front desk. "Hi," I said to the clerk, the same one I'd spoken to earlier in the week. "I need the room number for Jessica Carter." The clerk hesitated, clearly recognizing me. "Sir, I really can't." I cut him off. "You already told me she's here. I just need the room number, and I'll take care of the rest. Trust me, this isn't something you want to get involved in." He sighed and scribbled the number on a piece of paper, sliding it across the counter. "Room 214, he muttered. "Good luck." I made my way to room 214, my heart pounding with every step. I could hear muffled laughter coming from inside, and my anger hit a boiling point. I knocked on the door hard. The laughter stopped, and there was a pause before I heard Jessica's voice. "Who is it?" "Room service," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. The door cracked open, and Jessica's face appeared. Her eyes went wide when she saw me standing there. "Ryan?" she stammered, her voice full of panic. "Surprise," I said coldly, pushing the door open all the way. Kyle was sitting on the edge of the bed, his shirt unbuttoned, looking just as shocked as Jessica. He stood up quickly, like he was ready to defend himself, but I ignored him and turned my attention to her. "What the hell is this, Jessica?" I demanded, holding up the folder of evidence. "Work meeting, huh? Client presentation? Is this what you've been doing behind my back?" Jessica's face turned white as a sheet. "Ryan, I can explain," she said, her voice trembling. "Explain?" I snapped, throwing the folder onto the bed. The photos spilled out, along with the motel receipt. "Go ahead, Jessica. Explain this. Explain why you've been sneaking around with him while lying to me and our kids." Kyle, to his credit, or lack thereof, didn't even try to stick around. "I'm not getting involved in this," he muttered, grabbing his shirt and slipping past me toward the door. "Yeah, you better run," I called after him. "Coward." Jessica looked like she wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. "Ryan, please, let me explain," she said, her voice breaking. "It's not what you think." "Not what I think," I shot back. "You're meeting him at a motel, Jessica. What else could it possibly be?" Jessica started crying, her hands shaking as she tried to gather the photos. "It was a mistake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I felt so disconnected from you, and he made me feel special." "Disconnected?" I repeated, my voice rising. "So your solution was to cheat on me? To lie to me and sneak around behind my back? Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To our family?" She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. "I'm sorry," she said over and over. "I know I messed up, Ryan. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, just let me explain." I stood there, staring at her, feeling a mix of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. Part of me wanted to keep yelling, to let her know exactly how much she'd hurt me. But another part of me was just tired. Tired of the lies, the deception, and the weight of it all. "I'm going home," I said finally, turning toward the door. "When you're ready to tell me the truth, the whole truth, you know where to find me. But don't expect me to just forgive you. You've got a hell of a lot to make up for." I walked out of the motel and drove home in silence, my mind racing. I didn't know what I was going to do next, or if there was even a way to move forward from this. All I knew was that my marriage, the life I thought I had, would never be the same again. After confronting Jessica at the motel, I went home, still reeling from everything I'd discovered. The drive was a blur. I don't even remember how I made it back without crashing. All I could think about was how she looked at me, panicked and guilty, and how Kyle had fled like the coward he was. By the time I got home, my emotions were all over the place: anger, sadness, confusion, disbelief. I had no idea what to do next. The first thing I did when I got home was check on Emily and Jack. They were both asleep, completely unaware of the chaos that had just unfolded. Looking at them broke my heart. How was I supposed to explain this to them? How could I shield them from the fallout of Jessica's betrayal? I stayed in their room for a while, just watching them sleep and wondering how everything had gone so wrong. When I finally left, I went straight to the couch. There was no way I was sleeping in the bed Jessica and I had shared. Not after what I'd seen. Jessica came home the next morning, looking like she hadn't slept at all. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she hesitated in the doorway like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. "Ryan," she said softly, "can we talk?" I didn't say anything, just gestured for her to sit down. She perched on the edge of the couch, twisting her hands nervously. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I've hurt you, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I regret everything. It was a mistake, Ryan, a terrible, stupid mistake." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "A mistake," I said coldly. "Jessica, a mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. What you did was a choice. You chose to lie to me. You chose to meet him. You chose to betray me and our kids. So don't sit here and try to downplay it as a mistake." She started crying again, and for a moment, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then I remembered the way she'd laughed with Kyle, the way she'd acted like I didn't even exist, and my sympathy evaporated. After a long silence, I finally asked the question that had been eating at me since the moment I found out. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, wiping her eyes. "A few months," she admitted. "It started out innocent, just talking, texting, but then it turned into something more." "Something more?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You mean sleeping with him?" She nodded, her face crumpling. "It only happened a couple of times," she said quickly. "I swear, Ryan, it didn't mean anything." I laughed bitterly. "Didn't mean anything? Jessica, you risked our marriage, our family, for something that didn't mean anything? Do you even hear yourself?" For the next few days, things were tense. Jessica stayed in the guest room while I tried to figure out what to do. I couldn't bring myself to look at her, let alone talk to her, but at the same time, I felt like I couldn't think straight without getting some clarity. I called my best friend, Mark, and told him everything. He was as shocked as I was. "I don't know what to say, man," he said. "But whatever you decide to do, you have to put yourself and the kids first. Don't let her guilt you into staying if that's not what you want." His words stuck with me. I started thinking about what staying would even look like. Could I ever trust Jessica again? Could I ever look at her without seeing the betrayal? And even if I could, would staying be the right thing for Emily and Jack? I didn't want them to grow up in a toxic environment, but I also didn't want to rip their family apart. Jessica, to her credit, seemed genuinely remorseful. She started going to therapy on her own and asked me to consider going to couples counseling. "I want to fix this, Ryan," she said one night, tears streaming down her face. "I know I messed up, but I love you, and I love our family. Please, give me a chance to make things right." I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to make any promises, but I agreed to start therapy on my own. I needed to process my feelings before I could even think about moving forward, if moving forward was even an option. A week later, I had my first therapy session. It was harder than I expected, but it felt good to talk to someone who wasn't emotionally involved. The therapist, Dr. Green, asked me a lot of tough questions. What do I want from this marriage? What would it take for me to trust Jessica again? And most importantly, what would make me happy? For the first time, I started thinking about my own happiness instead of just focusing on the kids or the logistics of our marriage. I realized that I'd been so consumed by Jessica's betrayal that I hadn't stopped to consider what I actually wanted. As part of my healing process, I decided I needed closure with Kyle. I tracked down his number. Jessica had deleted it, but I found it in the call logs on our shared phone plan and called him. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. He sounded nervous, but agreed to meet me at a coffee shop. When I got there, he was already waiting, looking uncomfortable. "Ryan, man, I'm sorry," he said as soon as I sat down. "I didn't mean to." "Save it," I interrupted. "I'm not here for your apologies. I just want to know why. Why did you think it was okay to get involved with a married woman? Did you even think about what it would do to her family? He looked down, fiddling with his coffee cup. I didn't think it would go this far, he said. It started out as just flirting, and then, I don't know. I wasn't trying to ruin anything. Well, you did, I said coldly. And I hope it was worth it, because you've destroyed my trust in her, and in people like you. I stood up to leave, feeling a strange mix of anger and relief. Confronting him didn't fix anything, but it gave me some closure. At least I could say I'd faced him and gotten the answers I needed. After that, I decided to give therapy and Jessica a chance. I wasn't ready to forgive her, but I also wasn't ready to walk away just yet. We started couples counseling, and while it's been slow and painful, it's also helped us have honest conversations we'd been avoiding for years. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know one thing. I'm going to keep putting myself and my kids first. Whether that means staying with Jessica or moving on without her, I'll figure it out, one day at a time. Therapy has been helpful, but it's also been painful. Every session forces me to confront not only Jessica's betrayal, but also the cracks in our marriage that existed long before her affair. I'm trying to figure out if this relationship is worth rebuilding, or if it's time to let go and move on. One of the things Dr. Green has been pushing me to explore is what forgiveness would look like. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what Jessica did, she said during our last session. It's about deciding whether you're willing to move forward with her, or without her, while letting go of the anger and resentment for your own well-being. That hit me hard. I realized that part of me has been holding onto the anger as a shield, a way to protect myself from getting hurt again. But if I want to heal, I need to let that anger go, regardless of whether Jessica and I stay together. During couples therapy, Jessica admitted that she's been struggling with guilt and shame. I know I've hurt you in ways I can never take back, she said, tears streaming down her face. But I'm trying to be better, Ryan. I want to rebuild what we had, even if it takes years. Hearing her say that should have reassured me, but instead, it left me feeling conflicted. Could we really rebuild? Or were we just trying to put a band-aid on something that was fundamentally broken? Trust is still the biggest issue between us. Even though Jessica has been completely transparent, sharing her phone, her schedule, and even her therapy notes, I can't shake the feeling that she's still hiding something. Every time she leaves the house, I wonder if she's meeting someone. Every time her phone buzzes, I feel a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Dr. Green said it's normal to feel this way after infidelity and that rebuilding trust takes time. Trust is earned through consistent actions, not words, she reminded us during one session. Jessica can't undo what happened, but she can show you, day by day, that she's committed to change. Jessica has been trying. She's been going to therapy on her own, journaling about her feelings, and making a real effort to connect with me. But no matter how hard she tries, there's a part of me that wonders if I'll ever be able to fully trust her again. Ellie and Jack are still too young to understand what's going on, but they've definitely picked up on the tension between us. Ellie, especially, has been asking a lot of questions. Why do you and Mommy look so sad all the time? She asked me the other day, her big blue eyes filled with concern. I didn't know how to answer her. How do you explain something so complicated to a 6-year-old? Instead, I hugged her tightly and said, sometimes grown-ups have big feelings, but it doesn't mean we don't love you. It's moments like these that make me wonder if staying together for the kids is the right thing to do. Would they be better off with two parents who are trying to make it work? Or would they be happier in a home where their dad isn't constantly second-guessing his wife's every move? Despite all the pain and doubt, there have been moments of hope. A few nights ago, Jessica and I put the kids to bed and sat outside on the porch, talking. It was the first time in months that we'd had a real, honest conversation without yelling or tears. I miss us, she said quietly, staring at the stars. I know I'm the one who ruined everything, but I want to believe we can get back to what we had. Do you think that's possible? I didn't know how to answer her. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm willing to keep trying, for now. It wasn't a promise, but it was the truth. I'm not ready to give up entirely, but I'm also not ready to fully commit to rebuilding. I'm stuck in this strange limbo, torn between hope and doubt. One thing I've realized is that there's no quick fix for what happened. Even if I do choose to forgive Jessica and stay in the marriage, it's going to be a long, difficult road. Rebuilding trust takes time, and there's no guarantee that we'll make it to the other side. I've also started thinking about what my life might look like if I decide to leave. It's a terrifying thought, starting over as a single dad, navigating co-parenting, and trying to rebuild my life from scratch. But at the same time, it's freeing to imagine a future where I'm no longer carrying the weight of Jessica's betrayal. As I write this, I still don't know what the future holds. Some days, I feel like we're making progress. Other days, I feel like the wounds are too deep to heal. But for now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm focusing on therapy, on being a good dad to Ellie and Jack, and on figuring out what I want for myself. If anything, I feel more conflicted than ever. Therapy has been helpful. Jessica has been putting in the work, and there have been moments of connection between us that feel genuine. But at the same time, the pain of her betrayal still feels so fresh, and I can't stop wondering if staying is the right choice, or if I'm just prolonging the inevitable. The issue of trust continues to be the hardest thing to overcome. Every time Jessica leaves the house, a part of me wonders where she's going and who she's with. Even though she's been transparent about her schedule and has gone out of her way to include me in her day-to-day activities, the paranoia hasn't gone away. One night, while she was asleep, I caught myself scrolling through her phone again. I felt sick about it. It's not who I want to be, but I couldn't stop myself. I didn't find anything incriminating, and that should have made me feel better, but it didn't. It just made me realize how far we've fallen. I used to trust her completely, and now I'm this person who feels the need to check up on her every move. In therapy, Dr. Green told me, rebuilding trust requires both of you to be vulnerable. Jessica can't just earn your trust back by being transparent. You also have to decide if you're willing to take the risk of trusting her again. Her words hit me hard. I've been so focused on what Jessica needs to do to make things right that I haven't stopped to think about my own role in the healing process. But the truth is, I don't know if I'm ready to take that risk. Jessica has been doing everything she can to show me she's committed to fixing our marriage. She's been attending therapy twice a week, journaling about her emotions, and even planning small activities for us to do as a family. A few days ago, she surprised me with a scrapbook she made, filled with pictures of us and the kids. On the last page, she wrote, "I know I've hurt you, but I believe in us. I'm willing to fight for this. Are you?" Her gesture was sweet, and I could see how much effort she'd put into it. But instead of feeling reassured, I felt overwhelmed. I wanted to believe in us, too. But how do you rebuild something that feels so irreparably broken? Ellie and Jack continue to be my main focus. They've been my anchor through all of this, reminding me that no matter how hard things get, I have two little humans who depend on me. But they've also become a source of guilt. Every time I see Ellie draw a picture of our family or hear Jack say, "I love you, Daddy," I feel this crushing pressure to keep everything together for their sake. At the same time, I know that staying in a marriage where I can't fully trust Jessica isn't healthy, for me, for her, or for the kids. I've been thinking a lot about what kind of example I want to set for Ellie and Jack. Do I want them to grow up thinking it's okay to settle for a relationship that feels hollow? Or do I want to show them that it's okay to walk away when something isn't working? Last weekend, Jessica and I had one of the most honest conversations we've had since this whole thing started. After putting the kids to bed, we sat down on the couch, and I told her everything I'd been feeling. The anger, the doubt, the fear, and the overwhelming sense of loss. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I want to believe we can fix this, but I don't know if I have it in me." Jessica started crying, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. "I understand," she said quietly. "And if you decide you can't stay, I won't blame you. But I want you to know that I'm not giving up on us. I'll keep fighting for you, even if it takes years." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I could see how much she regretted what she'd done, and I believed she was sincere. But sincerity doesn't erase the betrayal, and it doesn't automatically rebuild trust. At this point, I feel like I'm standing at a crossroads. On one hand, there's the possibility of rebuilding, of giving Jessica a chance to prove that she's changed and that our marriage is worth saving. On the other hand, there's the option of walking away, of starting fresh and finding a new path for myself and the kids. Neither option feels easy or clear. Rebuilding means taking a huge emotional risk and putting myself in a vulnerable position again. Walking away means uprooting my life and facing the challenges of co-parenting and starting over. I've been praying for some kind of sign, something to tell me which path to choose. But so far, all I feel is uncertainty. For now, I'm giving myself more time to think. I've told Jessica that I'm not ready to make any decisions yet, and she's agreed to be patient. But I know I can't stay in this limbo forever. At some point, I'm going to have to choose, rebuild or let go. This has been the hardest update to write because, after weeks of agonizing over it, I've finally made a decision about what to do. I've spent countless hours in therapy, countless nights lying awake thinking about everything Jessica and I have been through, and countless moments wondering what's best for me, for her, and for our kids. I'm not sure if I've made the right choice, but I've made a choice. Before I get to the decision, I want to talk about something that helped me get here, taking time for myself. Over the past few weeks, I started doing things I hadn't done in years, things just for me. I reconnected with old friends, went on hikes, even picked up a guitar I hadn't touched since college. It felt good to have something that wasn't tied to the marriage or the betrayal, just something that reminded me who I am outside of being Jessica's husband and the kids' dad. During one of my solo hikes, I had a moment of clarity. I realized that, no matter what decision I made, I had to stop defining myself by this pain. Whether I stayed or left, I couldn't let Jessica's betrayal be the thing that shaped the rest of my life. That realization didn't make the decision easier, but it gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. Another big part of this process has been thinking about Ellie and Jack. I've tried to imagine what their lives would look like if Jessica and I stayed together, and what they'd look like if we didn't. Would staying give them stability, or would it teach them to settle for less than they deserve? Would leaving protect them from growing up in a home filled with resentment, or would it rob them of the chance to have both parents under one roof? Ultimately, I realize there's no perfect answer. No matter what I do, Ellie and Jack will be affected by this, and all I can do is try to minimize the damage. But one thing I know for sure is that they need a father who's happy and whole, not one who's stuck in a situation that drains him. A few days ago, Jessica and I had what I think will be our last couples therapy session. Dr. Green asked us to share where we were emotionally and what we wanted moving forward. Jessica went first. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can never take back," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I want you to know that I'm committed to this marriage. I love you, Ryan, and I love our family. I'm willing to keep fighting for us, no matter how long it takes." Her words were heartfelt, and I could see how much she meant them. But when it was my turn to speak, I realized something. As much as I appreciated her efforts, they weren't enough to undo the damage. "I believe you're sorry," I said, my voice steady. "And I believe you're trying to change. But I don't think I can ever move past this. I don't think I can ever look at you the same way again, and I don't think I can rebuild a marriage without trust." Jessica broke down, and I felt like the worst person in the world. But for the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't relief, it was more like acceptance. I finally knew what I had to do. I've decided to end the marriage. This isn't a decision I came to lightly, and it's not one I ever thought I'd make. But I've realized that staying would mean living in constant doubt and resentment, and that's not the kind of life I want for myself, or for Jessica, for that matter. She deserves the chance to rebuild her life and become the person she wants to be, just as I deserve the chance to find happiness and peace. I sat Jessica down that evening and told her my decision. "I care about you," I said, "and I want what's best for you. But I don't think staying in this marriage is what's best for either of us. I think we need to let each other go." She cried, of course, and begged me to reconsider. "Ryan, please," she said. "We can fix this. We can go to more therapy. We can try harder. Please don't give up on us." But I told her it wasn't about giving up. "This isn't about trying harder, Jess," I said. "This is about the fact that what we had is gone, and I don't think we can ever get it back. I want us to co-parent as a team and be there for the kids, but I don't think we can be partners anymore." Since that conversation, Jessica has been a mess. She's staying in the guest room while we figure out the logistics of the separation. I've started looking for an apartment nearby so I can still be close to the kids, and we're working on setting up a co-parenting schedule. It's not easy, but I know it's the right choice. Ellie and Jack don't know yet, and I'm dreading the conversation. We've agreed to tell them together once we have everything finalized, but the thought of breaking their hearts keeps me up at night. I just hope they'll understand that this decision is about giving them a better future, even if it doesn't feel that way right now. If there's one thing this experience has taught me, it's that healing isn't linear. There have been days when I felt like I was making progress, and days when the pain hit me all over again. But through it all, I've learned to prioritize my own well-being and to accept that some things just can't be fixed. I've also learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean staying. I don't hate Jessica, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life angry at her. But forgiving her doesn't mean I have to stay in a marriage that no longer works. Forgiveness, for me, means letting go and moving forward. As I write this, I feel a strange mix of sadness and hope. Sadness for what we've lost, but hope for what lies ahead. I know the road won't be easy, but I'm determined to create a new life for myself and my kids, one filled with honesty, love, and peace. Thank you, Reddit, for being there through all of this. Your support has been a lifeline, and I don't know how I would have made it through without you. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I feel ready to face it. Take care, everyone. And remember, sometimes letting go is the bravest thing you can do. After making the decision to end my marriage to Jessica, the hardest part of this entire ordeal was ahead of me, telling Ellie and Jack. As parents, Jessica and I knew this conversation would shape their understanding of everything moving forward. We wanted to get it right, even though the situation was far from ideal. Jessica and I sat down a few nights ago after the kids were in bed to discuss how we'd approach the conversation. For the first time in weeks, we were on the same page. We both wanted to keep things simple, honest, and focused on the kids' well-being. We need to emphasize that it's not their fault, Jessica said. That no matter what, we both love them and will always be there for them. I nodded, feeling the weight of what we were about to do. We also need to make sure they understand that even though things are changing, they'll still have both of us in their lives. We practiced what we'd say, even rehearsing a few scenarios where the kids might ask tough questions. By the time we finished, I felt as ready as I could be, but that didn't make the task any less daunting. The next evening, after dinner, we gathered Ellie and Jack in the living room. They were smiling and playful, completely unaware of the emotional bombshell we were about to drop. Seeing their little faces made my heart ache, but I knew this was something we couldn't avoid. Mommy and Daddy need to talk to you about something important, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. We want you to know that we love you both very much, and that will never, ever change. Jessica picked up where I left off. But sometimes, grown-ups decide that it's better for them to live in separate homes. It doesn't mean they don't care about each other. It just means they think it's the best way to be happy and to be the best parents they can be. Ellie's smile faded, and she looked back and forth between us, her little brows furrowed. Are you getting divorced? She asked quietly. The question hit me like a punch to the gut, but I forced myself to nod. Yes, sweetheart, I said gently. Mommy and I have decided that we're going to live in different homes. But that doesn't mean we're going anywhere. You'll still see both of us all the time, and we'll always be a family. Jack, who's only 4, didn't fully grasp what was happening. So, you're not going to live with us anymore, Daddy? He asked, his voice full of confusion. I'll still be close by, I reassured him. You'll have 2 homes, one with Mommy and one with me. And we'll make sure you get to spend lots of time with both of us. Ellie started crying, which broke my heart all over again. But I like it when we're all together, she said, her little voice trembling. Jessica hugged her tightly. I know, sweetie. And we do, too. But sometimes, being apart is the best way for grown-ups to be happy and to take care of each other. The rest of the evening was tough. Ellie cried herself to sleep, and Jack clung to me, asking if we could still play soccer in the backyard like we always do. I promised him that we'd still do all the things we love, even if some things were changing. After they went to bed, Jessica and I sat on the couch in silence for a long time. I hope we did the right thing, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. We did the best we could, I replied. That's all we can do. This will be my final update, Reddit. It's been a long, painful journey, but I'm finally starting to see a path forward. The weeks since the conversation with Ellie and Jack have been challenging, but also healing in their own way. Jessica and I have officially separated, and I've moved into a small apartment a few miles away. It's not much, but it's cozy, and I've made it a space where the kids can feel at home when they're with me. I've set up a little play area for Jack and a reading nook for Ellie, and seeing their faces light up when they walked in for the first time made all the effort worth it. Co-parenting has been a learning curve, but we're figuring it out. We've agreed on a schedule that gives both of us equal time with the kids, and so far, it's working. There have been a few hiccups, forgotten backpacks, missed texts, but for the most part, we're making it work. One thing I've learned is that communication is key. Jessica and I may not be partners anymore, but we're still a team when it comes to Ellie and Jack. We've set boundaries and established rules to keep things as smooth as possible, and I'm hopeful that we can continue to co-parent effectively. On a personal level, I feel like I'm finally starting to heal. I'm still in therapy, and it's been a huge help in processing everything that's happened. I've also been focusing on rebuilding my life, reconnecting with old friends, pursuing hobbies I'd neglected, and even going on a few dates. Dating again is terrifying, but also exciting. I'm not rushing into anything, but it's nice to feel like I'm moving forward instead of being stuck in the past. For the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful about the future. As for Jessica, I wish her the best. She's still going to therapy and working on herself, and I truly hope she finds happiness and healing. I don't know what the future holds for her, but I know that letting go of the anger and resentment has been freeing for me. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it does mean choosing not to let the pain control my life. So, here I am, a single dad, navigating a new chapter of life I never expected to face. It's not perfect, and it's not easy, but it's mine. Ellie and Jack are my world, and I'm determined to give them a life filled with love, stability, and happiness. To everyone who's been following this journey, thank you. Your advice, support, and encouragement have meant more to me than I can say. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that life doesn't always go the way we plan, but that doesn't mean it can't still be beautiful. Take care, Reddit. And remember, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most meaningful growth. Here's to new beginnings.